Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. is making some controversial moves at the health department. Kennedy, a vaccine skeptic, is claiming it's all to restore public trust in vaccines. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed, Kennedy announced he is removing and replacing all 17 members of an expert panel of vaccine advisors. Kennedy claims the group is, quote, plagued with conflicts of interest. So let's bring in CNN medical correspondent Meg Terrell to understand what this all means. Meg, Kennedy has made this clean sweep of this expert vaccine panel. What will be the biggest impact of this?
Well, Pamela, what I'm hearing from folks both on the panel and externally in the public health world is that they're concerned that particularly physicians, who are the most trusted advisors especially for parents deciding whether to vaccinate their kids, that physicians won't have this trusted panel that's been around since 1964 to depend on to go to understand what the recommendations are for vaccines. And perhaps an external source may need to be established to provide that kind of trusted guidance. This is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or the ACIP. This is this expert group of outside advisors to the CDC that meets in public and makes recommendations. All of their conflicts of interest are all stated, and occasionally they recuse themselves if there is something that's considered an issue. But folks that I've talked with said that these folks are extremely well vetted. This is a group of doctors, infectious disease researchers, and pediatricians, all now getting dismissed. One public health person I spoke with, Dr. Michael Osterholm, called the idea that RFK Jr., who has spread distrust in vaccines himself, is doing this in order to restore public trust. He said that's like the arsonist complaining about fires in the neighborhood. And Pamela, we should also point out that maintaining this specific committee was a promise that Senator Bill Cassidy said RFK Jr. made to him when he voted for him. Take a listen to this speech he made in February about it.
It confirmed he will maintain the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices recommendations without changes.
Now, Cassidy posting on X yesterday that, of course, now the fear is the ACIP will be filled up with people who know nothing about vaccines except suspicion. He says, I've spoken with Secretary Kennedy and I'll continue to talk with him to ensure this is not the case. We'll see what that means, Pamela. But HHS is saying this committee is still planning to meet at the end of June. We don't know who the members are going to be. We'll have to see if they can actually put it together in the next 15 days.
I know you'll be watching it. Meg Terrell, thanks so much. Wolf?
All right, we're joined now by the Dean of the Brown University School of Public Health, Dr. Ashish Jha. He's also the former White House COVID-19 response coordinator. Dr. Jha, thanks so much for joining us. As you know, RFK Jr. is an outspoken vaccine skeptic. He claims he wants to restore the public's trust in vaccines with this latest move. What's your reaction?
First of all, Wolf, thanks for having me back. And look, what he said in his op-ed was a series of nonsense about a group of individuals, experts, as we heard in that report, who shape what vaccines, if any, are going to be available to the American people. So obviously this is very concerning. We'll have to see who he appoints next, but this is a step in the wrong direction.
You posted on social media, and I'm quoting now from your post, quote, the scientific expert advisors he fired were among the nation's best. This is part of his effort to limit access to vaccines for America's kids, close quote. What do you think is Kennedy's end goal with these latest moves?
Yeah, so we do have to look at this move in a broader context, right? We have the worst measles outbreak of the last 25 years, and he has been very non-committal about promoting vaccines to end that outbreak. He's raising issues about autism. That's settled science. We know vaccines don't cause autism. Then you put this in the middle of all of that, and what you have is a pretty clear picture that what Secretary Kennedy's trying to do is make sure that vaccines are not readily available to Americans, not just for kids, for the elderly. He could go pretty far with this move, and I really am worried about where we're heading.
In his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, RFK Jr. wrote this, and I'm quoting, without removing the current members, the current Trump administration would not have been able to appoint a majority of new members until 2028, close quote. Is that how science and these advisory panels are supposed to work?
No, well, we've never had administrations worry about as long as the people are qualified. Look, when the Biden administration came in, almost all of the appointees had come from the first Trump administration. That was fine because they were good people. They were experts. Right now, it's the same thing. The people he is firing are experts, like a nurse in Illinois who has spent her entire career getting kids vaccinated, cancer doctors from Memorial Sloan Kettering. Like, these are really good people. And generally, CDC has not worried about when were they appointed. The question is, are they good and are they conflict-free?
Hundreds of employees beyond all of this over at the National Institutes of Health have signed a scathing public letter accusing the Trump administration of endangering people's health and politicizing research. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel for those scientists who have to live under this. We are clearly seeing a politicization of science that is nothing like anything I've seen in my lifetime. We're seeing a gutting of the relationship we've had between NIH and our academic medical centers and research universities that lead to new treatments and cures. And it's great to see those scientists speaking up. I hope Jay Bhattacharya is listening to them and is going to respond.
And very quickly, before I let you go, Dr. Jha, do you fear that young kids, children, could be endangered by these latest moves involving vaccines?
No doubt, Wolf. Look, kids rely on vaccines. I'm worried about whether the next generation of kids are going to have access to polio vaccines and measles vaccines. That's where we're heading. That's what we have to push back against.
Joining me right now is one of the now former members of ACIP, one of the 17 committee members forced out yesterday, Noel Brewer, a professor of public health and health behavior at UNC. Dr. Brewer, thank you for being here. What is your reaction to this?
It was deeply surprising. No one really saw this coming. There were some questions about some members who had had their status become inactive for periods of time because of administrative problems, but this is really very surprising to all of us.
How did you find out? How did you and the entire committee find out that you had essentially been fired?
Well, one of your journalist colleagues sent me an email and shared the Wall Street Journal article. And so that's how I found out, was through an email from a journalist.
Wow. I want to read for you some reaction from a couple of prominent scientists as well to what RFK Jr. is doing with this. Dr. Richard Besser, who said, "Nobody has done more than Secretary Kennedy to sow unwarranted doubt about the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. This decision demonstrates a complete lack of caring about the health and safety of every American." And Dr. Tina Tan is the president of Infectious Diseases Society of America, and she wrote, "Unilaterally removing an entire panel of experts is reckless, short-sighted, and severely harmful." What do you think this is going to mean for public health, the critical work and the data that you and your other committee members analyze and go through? I mean, do you think this is going to do harm?
Anytime there's something going on with vaccines, we should be thinking about three audiences. First and foremost, we should be thinking about the public. I don't know that the public is going to have a way of understanding what's going on here. Some people who care a lot about public health will get the gist that this is a problem and this is not really helpful. The second audience is physicians and other healthcare providers. Those are the folks who deliver vaccines, but also their advice on vaccines is the single most important influence on the decision to get a vaccine. And we've lost them. So ACIP's credibility with physicians and other healthcare providers has just disappeared overnight. It needs to be rebuilt carefully and methodically and probably over time. The question becomes, what happens now with those recommendations? It may be that another organization is necessary that's outside of the government to establish credible and independent vaccine recommendations. The third group, of course, is lawmakers of varying kinds and people who set policy. Those folks have to also understand that there are consequences to every decision.
Well, wiped out overnight in that trust, and everyone knows, any parent knows, the single most important person that you trust when it comes to these decisions is your pediatrician, for sure, when it comes to your children. RFK Jr. in this announcement, and he writes at length, he accuses the panel and its members of quite a lot. It centers around accusing many of you all of the way he wrote it is of the panel being plagued with persistent conflicts of interest, and that most of ACIP's members have received substantial funding from pharmaceutical companies, including those marketing vaccines. I mean, essentially the way he lays it out over and over in this is essentially saying that the committee is corrupt and can't make an unbiased recommendation. Can you respond to those accusations?
I really don't have a way to have a conversation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's a political appointee who is doing his best given his goals. And many of us in public health have different goals. The goals for ACIP have always been to have independent and very strong, clear, scientifically based recommendations, and they've achieved that over many decades. The specifics about conflicts of interest are somewhat technical, but the most important thing is that you can't have any. If you have conflicts of interest, ACIP is not for you. That's not a committee you should be on. You should go somewhere else. And so the current members have essentially no conflicts of interest, except maybe one or two who had either some recent or ongoing funding or were doing some kind of advisory work. And that is clearly stated on the CDC website. So there's no invisibility here. And I recall clearly one of our members on the committee stepping aside from one or two decisions on a recent meeting.